72, 73, 74.
What's up guys, welcome back to Talaria Boys. This is my Talaria Sting R, and I know we keep saying our bikes are fully built, but they've been missing one thing. Here it is. Finally, an upgraded motor worth having. This is the Talaria SOTION motor. This thing has a ton of power. We're gonna get it thrown in there, see what it can do.
Alright, we are flipping the video around. You can see this motor is already installed, and if you guys want to see how to install it, wait till later in the video. There will be a full how-to in-depth guide for getting this thing put in. But now we're going to dive straight into what this motor is capable of, why we recommend it, and why it is so much better over a stock Talaria Sting R motor, stock Surron motor, stock MX3 motor. So now let's get into some power numbers, and then we're going to head out on the road and compare it to Alex's bike, which is exactly the same apart from the motor. It still has a stock motor. So we'll show those differences, also do a top speed run. Let's get into it. First off, I need to give a huge shout out to Adam at Darwin EV. We have recently partnered with him. You guys saw a recent video with the Torque TC500 controller for Talaria, and we highly recommend that you guys go and purchase from him. He has excellent customer service and support, and this motor is no different. So this motor costs $950. However, we do have a discount code with Darwin EV. So go check the link in the video description. You can use that code, save yourself some money, and get this motor installed. Let's talk about the motor we are upgrading from first. So that is the stock Talaria Sting R MX4 motor. We have been able to pull a maximum of right at 17 kilowatts of power. However, it's not really able to hold that peak power very long. It dips down fairly quickly to around 14 to 15 kilowatts and will hold that fairly well. The motor also gets fairly hot when pulling those numbers. Now the next number we want to talk about is your phase amps, which is basically your torque. So this number we have only been able to pull in the upper 400s, 480, 490, maybe peaking at 500 once or twice. That's how many phase amps we've been able to pull. So this motor's rated at 24 kilowatts, and we've actually pulled even higher than that, which is super impressive. Some motors you can pull a little bit more than they're rated because they like to keep things conservative in how they measure that. We've actually measured 24.6 kilowatts, which is extremely impressive for our battery, because this battery is not even rated that high. So we might even be able to pull even more with the Talaria race battery that might be coming soon, because we finally found the limit of this battery. This motor is also rated at about, well, so far we've pulled 900 phase amps, so 400 more, almost double of what our previous motor did. And what that does is it allows this motor to feel like it has so much more torque and front end lift. So we've actually paired this motor with a much smaller rear sprocket in all of our testing because we just had so much torque. If we ran like a 58 tooth, a 54 tooth sprocket, it's just wheeling so easy. You can't even control it because it has so much torque. So that's the differences between the two motors in the things that are going to be most important: your power output and your phase amps. Now, in our testing, we have been running this motor to the absolute limit of our battery. So in this case, our motor and controller outperform our battery. Our battery is doing fantastic. It's actually been pulling higher power than it's rated to. Our battery's rated at 22 kilowatts, and we've pulled higher numbers than that with this motor. And we've been pulling 900 phase amps. So this thing is performing way differently than our stock Talaria Sting R motor. And to make this clear though, we didn't necessarily think that we needed more than 17 kilowatts until we tried it. And then we tried it, and now this thing is like an absolute rocket ship. I can't even imagine what 30, 35 kilowatts that some of the like ebmx and surron guys are running, because this thing is so freaking fast. This motor has actually a fairly similar RPM limit to the stock MX4 motor. This motor does not have a much higher KV rating, so the RPMs don't get spinning up super high. But this motor is different in a way because it has so much more torque. So it does feel different, and you can run a smaller sprocket and still have a really nice top speed because it has so much torque. Whereas the stock Sting R motor, you would kind of run a bigger sprocket because you didn't have very much torque, and then you wouldn't have very much top speed because your RPMs couldn't get your gear ratio spinning fast enough. I hope that makes sense. Really quick, I want to talk about what controller we paired this combo with. Now, Reed's bike has already been running ebmx X9000 controller. This is the version 1, so it has slightly lower limitations on power numbers and phase amps than the version 2, but it's very close. Now, why we paired it with this instead of a lot of the other controllers we've been testing recently, such as the Nuclear P24F, Torp TC500, or we've ridden KO in the past, BAC. Why did we pair it with this controller? Well, this controller is rated at a lot higher phase amps than some of those other ones. The Nuclear and the Torp specifically are rated at only 500 phase amps, which we could pull on our stock motor. This one, like I said, we've already pulled 900 phase amps, which is the limit of this controller. Now the version 2 is limited to 1,000 phase amps, and I think we would be able to pull 1,000 if we had that version 2. So maybe someday we'll test that, but honestly 900 is so much more than we were used to, so it just makes such a massive difference. So that's the main reason being this ebmx X9000 controller is able to pull much higher power numbers, much higher phase amp numbers, and stay cool while doing it than a lot of those other controllers we tested. Now, I don't want to say that those controllers are bad, because they're not. Those controllers are excellent on a stock bike, stock battery, or even up to 18 kilowatts, which is about what those are good to, but you will have less phase amps, less torque, and this is kind of the Mac Daddy controller that pulls way higher power numbers, and that's why we've paired it with our high power SOTION motor. Okay, now we're gonna head out and show you guys some real-time data, logging it on our phones, doing some drag races, some top speed runs, and show you what this motor's capable of. Let's go. Okay guys, it is drag race time. We have the SOTION upgraded motor on that bike. Everything is the same on this bike besides the motor. We have this turned up higher than it's able to go motor-wise, so we're not gonna be limited. We're gonna show up on the screen what we're actually pulling. Here we go. 3, 2, 1, go. He is blasting away.
Alright, you guys saw that? I smoked Lance. This bike is way faster now. It's almost too fast, really. We're about to do a top speed run, and I already know what I hit, so stay tuned for that. We're about to do one more drag race where we set the bikes to exactly the same, 17 kilowatts, 500 phase amps. See what happens. This bike should keep going slightly faster than that one, because this motor can actually hold 17 kilowatts for a long period of time. So let's go do that, see what happens. My bike also has a 42 sprocket, where Alex's has a 44 2-sprocket. So I actually have less torque than Lance does, even at 500 phase amps. So that might play a role a little bit. We'll see what happens.
Okay guys, drag race number 2. We got Reed's bike turned down to those lower power numbers, 17 kilowatts, 500 phase amps. I have a slightly larger sprocket, remember. You ready? Okay, 3, 2, 1, go! I've got him. But here he comes. So let me just make sense of what just happened. So Reed's motor was running what mine is limited to. Now, mine was like pulling the same amount of phase amps as his, but mine's a smaller motor. It kind of reacts a little bit differently to phase amps. But also, my motor will go 17 kilowatts, but only for a second, and then it drops down to like 15, 14 kilowatts, where Reed's is gonna hold above 17 the entire time. So that's why he was just able to just blast me.
Let's go. I still beat him. That was kind of weird though. He definitely got the jump on me at the start, and it took me a little bit to catch back up, but then I was just gone. I think that those 4 teeth on the sprocket do a big difference. Then also this motor might just do torque a little different than that one.
Yeah, I mean, every motor is going to handle phase amps a little bit differently. That's what I was just saying. But the biggest difference is that where this motor peaks to 17 for 1 second and lowers itself down to 14 kilowatts, that thing, we're going to look at the recording, but it was probably doing over 17, around 17 the entire way. And that's why you saw I had a huge gap on him, and he flew past me still and was gonna achieve a much higher top speed by the end of that drag.
Yep.
So the reason Reed's bike is pulling more than 17 kilowatts when it's set to 17 kilowatts is because we learned this from ebmx, in that they don't want to restrict the way that the power comes on, and because it makes it feel way less smooth. So when you're set at 17 kilowatts, if your controller went straight to 17 and then clamped down on how much power it was pulling, it wouldn't feel very good. It wouldn't feel smooth, and it would feel like you hit a wall and couldn't really achieve what you wanted to achieve. So Reed's pulls more because it's able to, from the battery and the motor and the controller, but it goes right up to 17 and then just goes overboard a little bit until it backs itself back down, so it still feels nice and smooth and good to ride.
Doesn't just have a cutoff.
Yeah, that's the easiest way to explain it. It also has to do with field weakening and a few other things, but that's the easiest way to just understand. If the controller clamped your power off right at 17, your bike wouldn't feel very good, and it would do that no matter what power you set it to. So that's why those go up above what we set them to. And we didn't know that until recently, but it makes sense.
All right, you guys, it is top speed time. You got our GPS here. We've got my phone in my pocket recording the ebmx app, so you can see a live output of all the power numbers and RPM numbers. Let's see if we can hit 80 miles an hour. The fastest I was able to do with the stock motor was 73 miles an hour. So, see what happens. All right, you guys, it's time. Here we go. $71, $73, $74, $75, and that's it. That's all the road I had. 74.8. All right, guys, we're doing one more. See what happens. This thing has so much torque. $72, $73, $74, $75, $76, $77. That's all we got. We got a little higher on that run. 76.7. That is so fast. The only time I would ever go that fast is to do a top speed run. When I'm ever riding the bike, I would never go that fast on purpose. That's just stupid to go that fast, really.
We just got back from that top speed run, 76.7 miles an hour. That is stupid fast, way too fast for this bike. It should not be going that fast, but it does. And
yeah,
that's pretty cool.
Just to be clear, so like talking about that top speed run, we did it with a GPS, so it's all verified. And also, just to be clear, we do not recommend that you really go that fast ever. It's kind of fun to know that your bike can do it, but we don't ever go that fast on a normal scenario. We don't ever do it unless we're literally filming one clip for you guys to see how fast it really goes. And also, just understand that this bike is totally upgraded with brakes and wheels and all kinds of stuff to make it safer, suspension, everything, to be able to do those speeds. 76 mile an hour top speed may sound fast, but also may sound like it's not that much different from what we were hitting on our stock motor, and that's true, but let me explain what the difference is. So on our stock motor, these motors do have fairly similar like RPM ratings, but on our stock motor, to be able to get in the 70 mile an hour range with similar gearing, we had to change all kinds of advanced app settings and motor settings, and it essentially made our motor go faster, but the tune felt like garbage. Like, we would only do that to get a top speed, and then we'd immediately go back and change all of our settings, lower our field weakening to where our motor was comfortable and felt good. But the difference is that when we had those settings to where our motor felt good, we could only get in the low 60 mile an hour, which is fine, because that's all we need. Like, that's all we ever want to ride. But in this motor's case, we have it set up with the new tune from ebmx that we've been working with them on and making sure that everything is dialed, and boy is it dialed, because we are running max app settings, max field weakening, max everything, and it just feels fantastic going 10 miles an hour and going 76 miles an hour. It doesn't feel like you're making the motor do something that it doesn't want to do. So that's one of the other main differences, is sometimes you can make a motor go faster by tweaking stuff, but it's not necessarily the best thing for your riding and for the motor. But in this case, it's running perfectly at maxed out settings, and it feels like it's happy to do it. So that being said, we think that there is more potential for more top speed with that new ebmx Talaria race battery that we have on order. So we're super curious to see if we can get a few more kilowatts, a few more top speed numbers out of this. Not that we really care though, because I don't know, we just really don't need to push it. We're off-road trailer riders, and we don't push 23 kilowatts on a single track trail. We push like 12 or 11 or 10.
It's fun to do it on the road though.
Yeah, on the road is like a whole different ball game.
For sure.
And I think that's where we get to the point of the video of who we recommend this motor for. And that basically is like, it just depends on what you want to do. If you have a super powerful controller already, you have a nice upgraded battery, and you want more power than you're currently getting, then that's who this motor is for. If you have an upgraded battery and controller like I just said, and you don't feel like you want to go any faster or have any more power, then you don't need it. It's pretty much as simple as that.
Yeah.
If you want to push over 20 kilowatts, that's what you need this motor for. But you also have to remember that there's really not very many batteries out that can pull over 20 kilowatts for very long or very well. Like, we've been extremely impressed with our battery for not being like the race spec of the battery, but it's doing a lot better than a lot of other people's batteries testing this kind of stuff. So we have been super satisfied with this. We're not hating on it by getting a better battery. We just finally reached a point after 10 months of having these batteries to where it's like we finally found another component make the battery the limiting factor.
Yep.
If that makes sense. So one other place that would make a difference in upgrading this motor is if you're running, say, 15 kilowatts, 14 kilowatts, and you push your bike and motor really, really hard to where you're getting the motor really hot or you're overheating it, say you're riding like a motocross track and you're really pushing the limit of that, then this motor will perform a lot better because it will hold those power numbers way more consistently and not overheat near as fast. This motor is staying drastically cooler than our other motor running the same amount of power. And again, it's capable of way more power, right? 24 kilowatts, but doesn't mean you necessarily have to run that, but it will still run way better at 15 kilowatts than your stock motor will. So that's just another scenario. If you're having problems with overheating, this is going to help you drastically. If you made it this far in the video, thank you. Please hit the subscribe button, and if you're interested in purchasing this SOTION motor, hit up Darwin EV. Again, we have that discount code down in the description. So it's time to go back 3 weeks and watch us install this. Me and Reed are going to tag team swapping this motor out. We're going to show you guys everything that comes in the box. We're going to do a little bit of repinning on our connector here. We're going to show you how to take this motor off, take the gearbox off of this motor, put the gearbox onto this motor, and then reinstall it back in the frame, and show a little bit of setup on the ebmx X9000 to make sure that your motor is running properly. Now, this motor is a very high power motor. You can tell, like, it's a beefy motor. I had my motor out a couple days ago, and I was kind of feeling the difference between this one and that one. This is about 3 pounds heavier. Oh, and really quick, if you guys enjoy this video, hit that subscribe button. We have got more cool videos on the way. And huge shout out to Darwin EV for working with us on getting this SOTION motor and helping us get set up. If you guys are interested in purchasing one, we'll have a link down in the description. He gets them sent out super quick. Okay guys, we're gonna get this motor installed. We kind of have an order of operations here to make this as simple as a process as possible. First order of business is to unplug our battery and take it out. We don't want any power going through all these wires while we are disconnecting things. Next operation is going to be to remove our chain. We're going to pop that off. Sometimes you do have to loosen your rear axle and slide it forward just a little to get your chain off. So we will do that so that we can remove our actual gearbox here. Our goal in this video is going to be to pull out the motor and the gearbox all hooked on as one. That's been the easiest way for us in the past. We're going to pull it out all as one unit. To do that, we do need to remove our skid plate. This is an aftermarket skid plate, but to remove your stock one, it's just 2 bolts on each side. Super simple. We will either need to remove the controller partially, maybe just the bottom 2 bolts, but we just need to get the 3 motor phase wires unscrewed from the controller. So we'll look at our room in a second once we have everything partially taken off. And we're also going to remove this plastic panel. There is 4 screws, 2 3mm screws on top, 2 4mm Allen screws on the bottom.
Also took the cover off by the gear oil.
Yep, gear oil cover. We'll show this side. It's just got 2 little bolts. And we're going to pull this whole setup out of the way. Okay, Reed has his controller halfway taken off so that he can reach in here and remove the 3 phase wires that run from the motor to the controller. Those are a 5mm Allen. He'll peel those off. You can see he's already got one off right here. And then we're also going to reach into this wire boot right here, and we're going to unplug the encoder that runs from the motor. So you'll trace this wire back right here into this boot and unplug it. Okay, our next main step is literally to remove the motor and gearbox combo altogether. And then what you guys are gonna do is kind of all at the same time. This does help if you have somebody to kind of help hold up the weight of your motor. This is a bolt you need to remove. That holds your motor on. This is a bolt you need to remove. You also have a big bolt right here that runs through the back of the gearbox and has a nut on the other end. So it's the one right above your suspension linkage. That's an 8mm on one side, 15mm socket on the other. When you come around to this side, this is the other motor bolt that you need to remove. And then the other one is right down here. So you have 4 motor bolts and 1 big bolt back here. One more thing we forgot to do, you need to unplug your DC converter right here, and that will stay on your motor, and we'll swap it to the other one in a sec. So the easiest way to do this is you can literally remove all 4 of the small motor bolts holding it on. If you leave this one big gearbox bolt, that will literally hold the weight. The motor is loose, you can see it wiggle. So now we're gonna have one of us hold it and have one of us pull that pin out, and we're gonna drop the motor down just like this. Here we go, there's our bolt. We're just gonna lower this baby right down out. There it is. So that's your motor, gearbox, DC converter combo right there. So we're gonna swap everything on here to the new motor. Okay guys, our next step is to remove everything off of this and stick it on the new motor. You guys can see they look pretty different because there's a lot of stuff on here. I recommend taking a picture of this so you can line everything up on the correct screw holes. Now SOTION says that this motor is direct plug and play. However, it is not. We've had a couple people install this recently since we've gotten ours the last couple days, and there's been a little bit of discrepancy on screw length and a few things relating to these 2 spacers that hold one side of the motor on. So we're gonna remove all these things and we're gonna move them to the new ones, but we're gonna add a little thin washer to between the top head of this screw and the metal right here on every single one so that our screws don't bottom out in these holes before the gearbox is tightly mounted onto the motor. So that's our first step. As Reed's removing these, we just want to make it clear that you do not remove all the bolts on top of this piece of the gearbox. You just do these 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Also, these bolts are going to be very tight. Like, we're having to be very careful breaking them with the Allen wrench and then loosening them carefully to not bend them or break them, because they do have a significant amount of Loctite on them and they're just very snug in there. Next up, we need to remove the snap ring off of this with our snap ring pliers. Pull our front sprocket off.
Our snap-ling pliers.
Yep, our snap-ling pliers. Then we're gonna pull this baby off. We have all of our bolts off, and you can lift the gearbox out. Kind of just gently wiggle it. There it is. So now our motor's looking like our other motor, right? We've got.
Don't look at that.
Yeah, don't look at that. We didn't break that bolt off. Okay, our next order of business, once you get your gearbox removed, we need to set up this motor for the gearbox installation by putting on our gearbox motor mount. So they do not supply screws to mount this on, and the stock screws off of your stock gearbox mount are not long enough. So we again had to find our own screws. They are pretty long. We're actually using like the kind of the same style of bolts that hold like your brake caliper to your fork, and we're gonna line those up, thread those bad boys in. Again, we are talking to SOTION to get them to fix these things, to send you bolts that are gonna work with this, to potentially send you bolts that are gonna mount your gearbox without having to find new spacers. We're working on that kind of stuff. The other thing that you have to do is when you are mounting this back on, these 6 bolts are now slightly too long. They actually bottom out into the threads on the motor, so we are adding one little thin washer to all 6 of those screws, and then they work perfectly. So again, we're talking to them, try to get some sort of situation figured out on that. This is how those are gonna mount. You've got your bottom bracket here, and then you have your DC converter on the side, and we'll have our top bracket on these 2 bolts up here. Okay, now that we got all 6 of those bolts in, we've got this slid on here. We're gonna go ahead and just tighten up, snug up our gearbox bracket here so that we can install our front sprocket on. Now we got to address our plug. So they do send the correct plug, it's just not wired in. So we've got a bunch of pins here. We're gonna show you how to do that.
Also a pain.
Also a huge pain. Sotion, come on. So we're gonna wire that in. What we did first is we actually took the stock plug that they send on the motor and you just cut all the wires off right here. They have pins inside, but we can't reuse those. They send new ones. So we cut it off and we're just stripping back the heat shrink tubing on the wires just a little ways, and we're gonna put new pins on and we're gonna wire it in. We'll flash a picture up on screen to make sure that you guys do it right, and then we'll be able to plug this baby in.
Okay, we got all these crimped on. Now, you gotta put these little rubber pieces on to get a good watertight seal. Then we're gonna stick them in the plug.
All right, Reed, explain to us correct order of operations for plugging those babies in.
So basically, we got this piece on top. We go red, top left, skip a spot, black, white, then bottom row, yellow, green, blue, brown.
Okay,
now,
we're gonna have this picture up on screen.
Yep, and now these are not going to match every one of these wires. Some of these colors match these ones, but not all of them do. So just follow our guide and it will work. So to get these pins in, you just put it in as far as it'll go, then get a little screwdriver or something and push it in the rest of the way and you'll hear a click. And then it'll be in its spot. And then you push the red rubber piece in there after.
Yeah, so when he was installing it, he slid all the rubber pieces back, kind of towards the back of the wires here, and got the pin in nicely to click, and then push the red thing in like he was saying.
And this is a huge pain, so hopefully Sotion sends it with this plug soon.
Yeah. Come on, Sotion, you gotta be sending it with that plug so we can just plug it right in.
This is ready to get thrown in.
Yeah, look at that bad boy. She's heavy.
It's really heavy.
Okay, we're gonna do the exact opposite of how we took this motor out. We're literally gonna slide the back end with the gearbox up to this spot where we can slide that bolt back in, and then that will take all the pressure off so we can slowly hold it and line up the rest of the bolts. All right. So get that slid up there, line up the back, grab your big bolt, go back just a hair more. I think we're going. There we go. Boom. Okay, that's in. You can literally take your hands off, and then we'll lift it up here, and we'll get this side bolts on first, because then we got to talk about the spacers on the other side that we have to grind down. So we got our bolts on the other side of the motor in. Now we're left with these two spacers that go on these two bolts that go into these spots right here between the motor and the frame. Now these are about 1 millimeter too long now, so they're just a hair too long. We got to grind them down. Again, Sotion, come on, you got to get that fixed. How we doing? She fit? So once we grind down both of the metal spacers, one here and one here, the bolt is then too long. It bottoms out in the threads going into the motor, so you have to find a washer or a lock ring style thing that will go right here inside this hole to basically stop your bolt from going in too far. Our best bet was these lock washers because they don't have a super big ring around the bolt, so they actually fit inside this hole. We already have one in on this one, and they seem to be doing the trick. So it's about that thick. Lock washer slides on our bolt, barely fits, and it doesn't stick out super far past the head, if that makes sense, so it'll fit in that hole. Our spacers have been ground down, bolts are going in. So now the heads of these bolts stick out a little further than they used to because we had to add that spacer, but our motor should be in. So now what we got to do is connect up our phase wires. So we'll hook these up to the back side of here, then we'll start putting stuff back together. It's pretty easy to get these motor wires connected up once you kind of move some of these other wires out of the way. And then we just got to get our encoder plugged in. The one that we repinned, plug that into this plug right here. All right, we got our motor phase wires connected up to the controller. We got everything nicely tucked in here. We got our encoder sensor routed up here and plugged into this wire boot. We also plugged in our DC converter, that silver thing that's hooked onto the gearbox. We plugged that back into the same wire boot. We got our controller bolted back on, and now we are going to get our chain put back on, get this plastic plate back here put on, and then we're going to put our skid plate back on, and we're going to be pretty much done besides getting it set up in the app for the controller. If you've made it this far in the video, it's time to just get our motor calibrated for the bike. To do this, you want to have your bike on a stand, all installed, and then X9000 app. You probably already know how to do this, but we'll just show you really quick. We're going to go ahead and just connect to our X9000, go in here, go over to our settings, and we're going to go to general. So you guys will already have your bike type selected as Talaria Sting. Now you're going to go in and select your motor type. Now the motor you are looking for is not actually in here yet. It might be by the time you get it. It will either be called SOTION FW02, which is the Talaria version of the SOTION motor, or it might be called SOTION Talaria motor. I don't know exactly, but if it is not here, email us at talariaboys@gmail.com. We'll send you the actual motor file and we can get it loaded in for you. Or you can go on the ebmx X9000 Facebook group, join that, ask the question. They will help you out as well. So in this case, you would select your motor type, and then you would make sure that you're running the proper battery. You probably, again, already have all of this set up for what you were running before. Next up, we're going to go to save. And if you selected a different motor, it would tell you to do a motor encoder calibration, which is what you want to do. In this case, we haven't selected one, but we're going to go do it anyway by going into controller calibration, scrolling down, and setting up encoder. So, like I said, make sure this is on a stand because your motor will spin. Your wheel will spin. Okay, successfully calibrated. This is where your field weakening percentage is. Now on this motor, we were saying we were running 100%. That is true. It was just at 40 for something else we were testing. So that's at 100, and then you're pretty much good to go. You can go into your modes and levels, and you can turn these up for whatever's safe for what your battery is capable of running, and your motor is going to be pretty freaking capable. Hit that subscribe button, and sneak peek, we have a 35 kilowatt surron build coming to the Talaria Boys channel. If you guys made it this far in the video, comment down below code Alfredo Brothers, and we'll know you made it to the end. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you next video. See ya!